A man fresh out of prison walked into a garage, desperate for a second chance. The owner laughed and said, "We don't hire criminals." But before he could throw him out, a quiet voice stopped everyone cold. Keanu Reeves looked up from his motorcycle and asked, "If we don't believe in redemption, then what are we living for?" Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. The prison gates clanked open just as the morning sun broke over the horizon. Derek Hayes stepped out with a single duffel bag hanging off his shoulder, the sound of gravel crunching beneath his worn-out boots. After 6 long years, the world outside felt foreign, almost hostile. The wind carried the scent of diesel and dust freedom, but not the kind that felt welcoming. He paused for a moment, staring at the road ahead that led to nowhere in particular. The guard at the gate had handed him $40 and a one-way bus pass to Los Angeles. "Good luck out there," the man had muttered without meeting his eyes. Derek didn't blame him. No one looked at an ex-convict the same way. To most people, he wasn't a man who had paid his debt. He was a walking warning sign. As the bus rolled down the freeway, Derek pressed his forehead against the window, watching the endless sprawl of neighborhoods pass by. Every house, every yard, every sign of normal life felt like another world. Families sipping coffee on porches, kids waiting for school buses, men in suits heading to work, all scenes from a life he once wanted but had thrown away in a single stupid night. He pulled out an old photograph from his pocket. It was creased and faded, a picture of his mother smiling beside a teenage version of himself before prison tattoos covered his arms. She'd passed away while he was still serving time. He never got to say goodbye. The memory hit him hard, and he blinked away the sting in his eyes. He'd promised her in his heart that he would change, that he'd make something of himself when he got out. But promises didn't buy shelter. By the time he arrived downtown, the sun was already high, and the air was heavy with the smell of smog and fried food from a nearby stand. Derek walked for hours, asking around for work. Every place he tried gave him the same look, hesitant eyes that softened when he said, "Just released," followed by polite rejection. One diner manager even slipped him a sandwich instead of an application form. It was kindness, but also pity, and that cut deeper than cruelty. By evening, he sat at a bus stop bench, hungry and exhausted. A group of teenagers laughed nearby, tossing empty soda cans into the street. Derek kept his head down. He had spent too many years reacting to disrespect with fists, and he couldn't afford another mistake. He took a deep breath and whispered to himself, "Stay calm, stay good, don't go back." The streetlights flickered on. Across the road, an auto garage sign caught his eye. The letters were chipped and faded, but he could still make out the words, "Richard's Auto Repair Mechanic Wanted, Experience Required." Derek's heart beat faster. He had worked in the prison workshop for years, rebuilding engines from scraps. He knew his way around a carburetor better than most certified mechanics. Maybe, just maybe, this was his shot. He stood up slowly, gripping his duffel bag like it carried the last of his hope, and crossed the street toward the lighted garage. He didn't know it yet, but fate was already waiting inside, wearing a leather jacket, sitting quietly beside a black Norton motorcycle, and reading a repair manual with quiet concentration. It was Keanu Reeves. Derek took one long breath and pushed the door open. The chime above it rang, sharp and metallic, announcing his arrival into a world that wasn't sure it wanted him back. The smell of oil and metal hit Derek as soon as he stepped inside. The garage was alive with the sound of ratchets clicking and air compressors humming. A couple of mechanics worked near the back, their hands black with grease. The man at the counter, in his late 50s with a thick mustache and a name patch that read Tom, looked up when Derek entered. His eyes narrowed slightly, the way people do when they sense trouble, before they even hear a word. "Can I help you?" Tom asked, wiping his hands on a rag. Derek straightened his back, trying to sound confident. "I saw the sign outside. You're looking for a mechanic?" Tom studied him. His eyes went from Derek's calloused hands to the faded tattoos on his forearms, then to the prison-issued duffel bag slung over his shoulder. It didn't take long for suspicion to set in. "Yeah, we're hiring," he said slowly. You got any experience? Yes, sir, Derek replied. 6 years working on engines, rebuilds, timing systems, the whole deal. Tom raised an eyebrow. 6 years, huh? Where at? There it was, the question Derek had dreaded since sunrise. He hesitated, then decided to tell the truth. At the State Correctional Facility workshop, the silence that followed was louder than the machinery in the back. One of the younger mechanics paused mid-task, glancing over curiously. Tom dropped the rag on the counter. You're saying you learned in prison? Yes, Derek said softly. But I'm good at it. I can prove it. Tom shook his head. You could be the best damn mechanic in California, but I can't risk it. My customers don't want to know an ex-con is touching their cars. It's bad for business. The rejection wasn't new, but it still stung. Derek opened his mouth to say something, but the words wouldn't come. He looked down at the floor, then back at the door. He'd been free for less than a day, and already the walls were closing in again. Tom sighed. Look, kid, I'm not saying you can't change, but I've been around long enough to know people don't. You'll find something eventually, maybe construction or warehouse work. Derek clenched his fists in his pockets. He wanted to shout that he wasn't the same man anymore, that he'd spent years trying to be better. But shouting wouldn't help, not this time. He nodded quietly and turned toward the door. Then something unexpected caught his eye. A sleek black motorcycle near the corner of the garage. It was the kind of bike you didn't see every day, polished yet lived in, with the name Norton etched on the side. A man sat beside it, leaning forward with a calm focus. A set of tools laid neatly before him. His face was familiar, though Derek couldn't place it right away. The man looked up briefly, his expression steady, patient. There was no judgment in his eyes, only curiosity. Derek looked away quickly, not wanting to intrude. He took another step toward the exit when Tom muttered, "You should have stayed where you came from." The words were cruel, tossed out without thought, but they hit like a punch. Derek froze, every muscle in his body tightening. For a second, his old instinct screamed to turn around, to fight back, to prove he wasn't weak. But he didn't. He just stood there, breathing through the anger. That was when the man by the motorcycle spoke for the first time, his voice calm but firm. That's a hard thing to say to someone who's trying to start over. Tom looked over, surprised. Do I know you? The stranger wiped his hands with a cloth and stood. The light caught his face, revealing what Derek hadn't noticed before. He wasn't just anyone. He was Keanu Reeves. The whole room seemed to pause, as if the noise of the garage itself respected the silence that followed. He had no idea that the man defending him would be the one person capable of changing the course of his life forever. Tom blinked in disbelief, his attitude shifting the moment he recognized who stood before him. You're Keanu Reeves. Keanu gave a small, polite nod, but his expression stayed serious. Just a man getting his motorcycle fixed, he said quietly, then glanced toward Derek. And watching someone else trying to fix his life. The air in the garage grew still. The other workers pretended to stay busy, but everyone was listening. Tom cleared his throat, suddenly uneasy. Didn't mean anything by it, he muttered. Keanu wiped his hands again, his tone calm but deliberate. You said people don't change, but maybe they just never get the chance to prove they can. He looked at Derek and added, What do you want, really? Derek hesitated, his voice barely above a whisper. A job. A clean start. That's all. Keanu studied him for a moment, then smiled faintly. Then let's see what you can do. Tom frowned, unsure how to respond. You're serious? Keanu shrugged lightly. Why not? Everyone deserves a fair shot. For the first time that day, Derek felt the weight on his chest ease. He didn't understand why this man, someone famous, someone who owed him nothing, was standing up for him. But in that moment, hope flickered to life like a spark on cold metal. As Keanu turned back to his motorcycle, the engine's reflection shimmered under the fluorescent light. Derek stood there, caught between disbelief and gratitude, unaware that this small act of kindness would become the turning point of his entire life. Outside, the sky began to darken. Inside, something brighter had just begun. The morning rush filled Richard's auto repair with noise and movement. Air hoses hissed, wrenches clinked, and the smell of gasoline hung thick in the air. Derek stood awkwardly by the entrance, clutching the strap of his duffel bag while Tom barked orders at his crew. It was the kind of place where everyone knew their role except him. Tom noticed him standing there and called out, "You again? Thought I told you yesterday we were full." Derek swallowed hard. "I just wanted to talk, sir. Maybe there's anything I can do." Tom sighed and motioned toward the back. "Fine, come on, make it quick." They stepped into the open bay, sunlight pouring in through the high windows. Derek's eyes flicked across the rows of tools, the engines being rebuilt, the half-finished cars with their hoods open like mechanical hearts. He felt at home in the smell of oil and steel, but the tension in his chest wouldn't fade. Tom crossed his arms, watching him closely. "So, what's your story?" Derek tried to sound calm. "I just got out, sir. I'm looking for honest work. I can fix anything with wheels, cars, bikes, even engines that look too far gone." Tom's expression didn't change. "Out of where?" Derek hesitated, but lying had never done him any favors. "State prison." The words fell heavy between them. Tools stopped clattering for a moment as the mechanics nearby glanced over. Tom's brows tightened. "You're saying you learned your trade behind bars?" "Yes," Derek answered. "They had a shop program. I worked hard every day. I've got the experience. I just need a chance to prove it." Tom rubbed his jaw, then shook his head slowly. "Listen, kid. I don't have anything against you personally, but you've got to understand this is a family business. My customers trust me. They leave their cars here, their keys, their wallets sometimes. If they find out I hired someone who just got out of prison, they'll take their business somewhere else." Derek felt his heart drop. He had expected hesitation, maybe even suspicion, but not this quick dismissal. "I understand, sir," he said quietly, "but people change. I'm not who I was." Tom let out a short laugh that wasn't cruel, but it wasn't kind either. "You'd be surprised how many men have told me that over the years. They say they've changed, then one bad day, one bad temper, and boom, back where they started. I can't take that risk." The other workers returned to their tasks, pretending not to listen, but their glances lingered on Derek. One man in a red cap whispered something under his breath that made another chuckle. Derek didn't catch the words, but he knew the tone. He'd heard it his whole life. "I'll work for free," Derek blurted. "Just let me show you what I can do. If I mess up, you don't owe me a thing." Tom looked at him, almost pitying now. "That's not the point, son. It's about trust. And that takes time." Derek's shoulders slumped. He stared at the concrete floor, fighting the urge to walk out before anyone saw the shame in his eyes. Behind him, Keanu Reeves remained seated beside his black Norton, quietly observing. He had been there for nearly an hour, waiting for his bike to be tuned. He didn't know Derek, but there was something in the man's posture, a kind of broken strength that made him keep watching. Keanu sensed what Tom couldn't see. This wasn't danger. It was desperation. The sound of a socket wrench echoed through the garage, followed by the hiss of an air compressor. Derek stood still, feeling the weight of every glance, every whisper. A younger mechanic, maybe 25, leaned toward another and muttered just loud enough to be heard, "Fresh out and already looking for work? Guy probably just wants the cash for something shady." The other man snickered. Derek ignored them, though his jaw tightened. He'd learned long ago that silence was sometimes stronger than words. Still, it burned inside him, the feeling of being caged, even when free. Tom glanced toward the clock, impatient. "Look, I'm not trying to humiliate you," he said. "But you've got to understand, the world doesn't move on just because you want it to. People remember." Derek met his eyes. "I know they do. But I've got to start somewhere. I don't want pity, and I don't want handouts. Just a chance to earn what I didn't before." Tom's voice softened, but his answer didn't change. "Son, you can't build trust overnight. And if I let you near a customer's car, I'll lose mine in a heartbeat." The rejection was final. Derek nodded, swallowing the disappointment. "All right," he said quietly. "Thank you for your time." He turned to leave, gripping the duffel strap over his shoulder. But as he walked past the black Norton motorcycle near the corner, a quiet voice called out, "You said you can fix anything with wheels, right?" Derek stopped. The voice was calm, steady, neither mocking nor pitying. He turned to see Keanu Reeves standing up from beside his motorcycle, wiping grease off his hands with a rag. His tone carried curiosity, not fame. "Yes, sir," Derek answered carefully. "Engines, brakes, transmissions, whatever it takes." Keanu studied him for a moment, eyes thoughtful. "What do you think's wrong with this bike?" Derek hesitated, then stepped closer. The motorcycle gleamed under the fluorescent lights, a machine both elegant and worn, clearly loved by its owner. He crouched beside it, examining the belts, the fuel line, the idle sound still faintly echoing in the air. "Timing belt's slipping a bit," he said. "Idle's uneven too. Could be a carburetor issue." Tom, still nearby, raised an eyebrow. "You sure about that?" Derek nodded. "Positive. You can tell by the pitch when it starts. Listen close, and you'll hear it stutter every few seconds." Keanu tilted his head, impressed. "Good ear." He turned to Tom. "Seems like he knows what he's talking about," Tom shrugged. "Maybe he does. Still doesn't mean I'm hiring him." Derek stood again, careful not to sound desperate. "You don't have to. Just let me take a look. If I can fix it, you'll know I'm telling the truth." Tom hesitated, torn between pride and practicality. But Keanu's calm gaze lingered on him, almost like a quiet challenge. Finally, Tom muttered, "Fine, but if anything gets worse, it's on you." Derek nodded, heart pounding. He picked up a set of tools from the nearby tray and knelt beside the bike. His hands moved instinctively steady, confident, familiar. For a few moments, everything else disappeared. The whispers, the judgment, the weight of his past. There was only the rhythm of bolts and gears, the hum of metal and breath. Keanu watched silently, his eyes following every motion. He saw something few people noticed, a man who wasn't just fixing a machine, but fighting for his dignity with every turn of the wrench. Minutes passed in silence, except for the soft clinks of metal. Derek adjusted the timing belt, wiped the oil from his fingers, and gently tapped the carburetor housing. Then he stepped back. "Try it now," he said quietly. Keanu turned the key. The engine roared to life smooth, balanced, the uneven stutter gone. The sound filled the garage like a living pulse. The other workers stopped to listen. Even Tom looked surprised. The rough growl had become a steady hum, the kind that only comes from someone who knows engines by heart. Keanu smiled faintly. "Sounds like she's breathing again." Derek nodded, his voice steady but humble. "Sometimes they just need a little patience. Machines don't quit on you if you listen close enough." The words hung in the air longer than anyone expected. Keanu looked at him with quiet respect. "That's true for people too," he said softly. Tom crossed his arms, trying to hide his discomfort. "All right, so you know your stuff. But fixing one bike doesn't change the fact you've got a record." Derek met his gaze calmly. "You're right, but every day's a chance to change that record." Keanu's expression deepened. He could see it, the mix of humility and hunger for redemption in Derek's eyes. There was no arrogance, only effort. No excuses, only honesty. Tom turned away, pretending to check a clipboard, but everyone could feel the shift in the room. The tension had eased, if only slightly. Derek picked up his duffel bag again, ready to leave before he pushed his luck. Keanu spoke up one last time, his voice carrying across the garage. "If we don't believe in redemption," he said, pausing as every mechanic looked up, "then what are we living for?" The sound of the running motorcycle filled the silence that followed. And in that silence, something began to change, not just for Derek, but for everyone who heard those words. The moment after Keanu spoke, the whole garage seemed to pause. Even the air compressor hissed more quietly, as if it knew something important was about to happen. Tom looked up from his clipboard, brow furrowed. uncertain whether to be annoyed or impressed. The other mechanics froze in place, watching the tall, calm man who had just stepped between a broken man and his last shred of hope. Keanu's voice carried softly but firmly. "Excuse me," he said again. "May I ask something?" Tom blinked, taken off guard. Sure?" Keanu stepped closer, his hands still streaked with oil. "You said you don't trust him, but you haven't seen what he can do yet." He turned his gaze toward Derek. "You said you can fix anything with wheels, right?" Derek's pulse quickened. He wasn't used to anyone defending him, much less someone like Keanu Reeves. He nodded, keeping his tone steady. "Yes, sir. If it's got an engine, I can make it run." Tom chuckled nervously, crossing his arms. "Hold on a second. You're Keanu Reeves, right?" A few of the mechanics whispered, eyes widening in disbelief. One of them even mouthed, "No way." Keanu gave a small nod, his expression humble. "That's what people call me," he said. "But right now, I'm just another man trying to get his bike tuned." Tom scratched the back of his neck, unsure how to react. "Well, this is a surprise. Didn't expect to have a celebrity walking into my shop today." Keanu smiled faintly, but his tone remained grounded. "I don't think fame means much when an engine doesn't start." He looked back at Derek, whose eyes were fixed on the motorcycle, as if drawn to it by instinct. "You said you can fix anything with wheels. What's wrong with mine?" Derek hesitated, scanning the Norton from a few steps away. The bike gleamed under the fluorescent light, but to a trained eye, small imperfections stood out. The faint smell of unburned fuel, the way the chain sagged just slightly, the dull tick from the idle. He crouched near it, his hands hovering inches from the chrome. "Timing belt slipping a bit," he said, confidence building in his voice. "Maybe the carb's running rich too. It's idling heavy." The garage was silent again. Tom raised an eyebrow, surprised by how sure he sounded. "You can tell that from just listening?" Derek nodded. "You can always tell when something's off. The rhythm isn't right." Keanu smiled, just enough for the corners of his mouth to lift. "Let's find out then." He straightened up, turned to Tom, and said gently, "Would you let him take a look?" Tom frowned, crossing his arms again. "I don't know about that. Liability, tools, customers." Keanu cut him off without raising his voice. "If something goes wrong, I'll take responsibility." Tom stared at him, thrown by the quiet authority in those words. There was no arrogance in Keanu's tone, just steady conviction, the kind that disarmed resistance. Finally, Tom exhaled sharply and stepped aside. "Fine, but if he breaks something, it's on you." Derek's hands trembled slightly as he reached for the wrench. It wasn't fear of the job, it was the weight of what this moment meant. For the first time since walking out of prison, someone had looked at him not as a criminal, but as a man capable of doing something right. Derek set his duffel bag down beside the bike and wiped his hands on his jeans. The air around him felt charged with tension, every eye in the garage fixed on what he would do next. He could almost hear the thoughts running through their heads that an ex-con had no business touching a machine that expensive, that this was going to end badly. But Keanu's calm presence behind him steadied his breathing. He crouched beside the motorcycle and examined it carefully. The engine casing was warm, the belt slightly worn, and the idle had an uneven pulse that confirmed what he had said earlier. Derek reached for a ratchet from the nearby tool cart, but his hands hesitated mid-air. He wasn't sure if he was even allowed to touch the tools. Tom noticed and said curtly, "If you're going to do this, do it. I don't have all day." Derek gave a quick nod, picked up the ratchet, and loosened the housing bolts. The sound of metal against metal echoed through the garage. As he worked, his movements became fluid, confident the way they had been in the prison workshop where he had rebuilt hundreds of engines from junkyard scraps. Each motion carried memory, precision, and a quiet rhythm born from years of repetition. Keanu crouched beside him, watching with quiet respect. "You've done this a lot, haven't you?" he asked softly. "Every day for 6 years," Derek said without looking up. Engines were the only thing that made sense inside. Keanu nodded. "Engines don't judge you," he said. A faint smile crossed Derek's face. "Exactly. You fix what's broken. You listen. You don't ask about the past. The bike's engine cover came off smoothly. Derek checked the belt alignment and adjusted the tension with slow precision. When he was satisfied, he reassembled the casing, then turned the key. The bike sputtered, coughed once, and then roared to life with a deep, smooth rumble that filled the entire garage. The sound was strong and steady, like a heartbeat finding its rhythm again. The mechanics who had been whispering earlier exchanged glances. One of them muttered, "No way." Tom stepped closer, arms still folded, pretending not to be impressed, but his expression betrayed him. He leaned in slightly, listening to the engine's new tone. "That's cleaner," he admitted grudgingly. Derek stood, his hands stained with oil, but his eyes bright for the first time that day. "Just needed a little patience," he said. "The timing was off by a tooth. You can feel it when the gears start to resist." Keanu turned off the ignition and smiled at him. "You've got a gift." Tom scowled faintly, unwilling to admit defeat. "So, he fixed your bike. That doesn't mean anything." Keanu looked at him evenly. "I think it means a lot. You said you can't trust someone like him. But trust has to start somewhere, doesn't it?" Tom didn't respond. He looked away, focusing on a clipboard that didn't really need his attention. The silence stretched, filled only by the fading hum of the engine. Keanu took a small step closer to Derek, lowering his voice. "You said you were looking for a job. What would you do if someone actually gave you one?" Derek's answer came without hesitation. "I'd show up early, stay late, and never give anyone a reason to regret it." The simplicity of his words hit harder than any speech could have. Keanu studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly, as if a decision had been made in his mind that no one else could see. The smell of oil lingered in the air as the tension began to settle. Tom leaned on the counter, arms crossed, pretending he wasn't moved, but everyone could see the shift in the room. Derek wiped his hands clean, avoiding eye contact, waiting for permission to step back. Keanu stayed beside him, calm and grounded, like a steady anchor in the middle of a storm. Tom broke the silence first. "All right, so he got lucky this time," he said. "But a few minutes of good work doesn't erase years of bad choices." Keanu turned toward him slowly. His voice was gentle but firm. "You're right. It doesn't erase them. But maybe it starts something better." He looked around at the other mechanics, then back at Tom. How many people ever become who they are without someone believing in them first? No one answered. The hum of the cooling engine filled the space between their words. Derek stood quietly, unsure if he should thank Keanu or disappear before someone changed their mind. "I appreciate the chance," he said softly. "That's all I wanted, to be given one." Keanu nodded once, his eyes steady. "Sometimes, that's all any of us need." He turned back to Tom. "You've built a good place here. Maybe it could be even better if you helped someone rebuild too." Tom opened his mouth, then stopped. The conviction in Keanu's tone made it impossible to argue. He finally muttered, "We'll see." Keanu smiled, faintly, a gesture both kind and knowing. "That's all I ask." As Derek gathered his bag, Keanu placed a hand on his shoulder. "Come by my shop tomorrow morning. I've got a place where people like you start over the right way." For the first time in years, Derek felt his heart steady not from fear, but from hope. The world that had slammed every door in his face had just opened one. The morning light poured through the wide garage doors, bouncing off rows of chrome and tools. The scent of grease and gasoline filled the air, but there was something else lingering to anticipation. Every mechanic in the shop watched silently as Derek stepped forward, tools in hand, ready to prove himself. He didn't look like a man out of place anymore. He looked like he belonged next to that motorcycle. His palms were slick with sweat. Not from fear, but from the weight of what this moment meant. He tightened his grip on the wrench and crouched down beside the Norton, his focus narrowing to the single task in front of him. This wasn't just about fixing an engine. It was about fixing his name. Keanu stood nearby, his calm gaze resting on Derek like quiet encouragement. "Take your time," he said. "The right fix doesn't rush itself." Derek nodded, his hands already moving with practiced precision. He loosened the timing cover and leaned in, listening carefully to the slight tension of the belt. The garage fell into a rhythm around him, the hum of machines fading, the clatter of tools slowing until all that existed was the soft click of metal and the steady sound of his breathing. One of the younger workers, a man named Pete, whispered, "Guy's got good hands." Tom shot him a sharp look. "Hands don't mean much if the mind behind them can't be trusted," he said. Derek heard it but didn't react. He'd learned that silence carried more strength than defense. He adjusted the belt tension, wiped the sweat from his forehead with the back of his arm, and gave the chain a gentle turn. Every motion was confident, controlled proof of years spent learning in places where mistakes had real consequences. After several minutes, he reached for the ignition. Keanu watched closely, his expression unreadable. The other workers leaned in, curiosity outweighing judgment. Derek turned the key. The bike sputtered once, then roared to life. The sound was smoother, richer, like a pulse rediscovered. The vibration filled the air, commanding attention from everyone in the room. Derek listened for the uneven chug that had plagued it earlier, but it was gone. The Norton idled with the kind of clean rhythm that only came from perfect calibration. Keanu smiled, nodding with quiet satisfaction. "You've got hands that remember good work." Derek looked up, a flicker of pride softening his usual guarded expression. "Engines don't forget you," he said quietly. "They just wait for someone who listens." Keanu's eyes warmed at that. "Exactly." Tom stepped forward, pretending not to be impressed. "So, he can fix a bike," he said. "That doesn't mean he can be trusted." The words cut through the air like a blade. The workers looked at one another, unsure whether to agree or stay silent. Derek froze, every muscle tensing, but he didn't speak. He didn't need to, because someone else already would. Keanu turned his head slowly toward Tom, his voice calm but sharp enough to stop every whisper in the room. "If we don't believe in redemption," he asked, pausing, "just long enough for the weight to sink in, then what are we living for?" The noise of the garage died completely. Even the engine seemed to quiet itself, leaving only the hum of fluorescent lights. Tom froze where he stood. For a long moment, he didn't say a word. The entire garage seemed to be waiting for his response, but none came. Keanu's question wasn't loud, yet it struck harder than any confrontation could. It lingered in the air, filling every corner of the room. One of the older mechanics, a man with gray hair and grease under his fingernails, looked up from his workbench. His voice was quiet but steady. "He's got a point, boss." Tom shot him a glare, but the defiance was half-hearted. He could feel the weight of every gaze on him. Keanu's calm stare didn't accuse or threaten it, simply asked him to look deeper, to question himself. That, somehow, was harder to resist. Keanu took a step closer, folding the rag in his hands. "You've spent years fixing engines," he said, his tone even. "You know when something's worth saving and when it's too far gone. Tell me, if you threw away every machine that ever broke down, what kind of mechanic would you be?" Tom frowned, unsure how to answer. "That's different," he muttered. "Is it?" Keanu's voice softened but didn't waver. "A man makes mistakes. So does a machine. But when something still runs underneath all that damage, when there's still something good left inside, doesn't it deserve a chance to run again?" Derek stood quietly beside the motorcycle, not daring to move. Every word felt like it was being spoken on his behalf, but also for anyone who had ever fallen and tried to get up again. Tom's face hardened, but his eyes faltered. "You don't know this guy," he said. "You don't know what he's done." Keanu nodded slightly. "You're right, I don't. But I don't need to know where someone's been to see where they're trying to go." That line hit the room like thunder. The younger mechanics who had been smirking earlier suddenly found themselves staring at the floor. Even Pete, who had joked before, shifted uncomfortably. Tom rubbed the back of his neck, trying to shake it off. "You talk nice, Mr. Reeves. But talk doesn't fix trust." Keanu gave a faint smile. "No, it doesn't. But actions do. You just saw one." He gestured toward the bike. He didn't ask for pity. He didn't beg for another chance. He just asked to prove himself. You let him do that, and he didn't let you down. The hum of the Norton filled the silence again, steady and alive. It wasn't just an engine running. It was proof, undeniable and simple. Derek finally spoke, his voice quiet but sure. I don't expect anyone to forget what I've done, he said, but I can't change the past. I can only build something better now. I just need someone willing to let me start. The sincerity in his tone was disarming. There was no self-pity, no excuses, only truth. Keanu nodded approvingly. You see, he said to Tom, redemption isn't a word. It's a choice. Every day. Tom looked away, his jaw tightening. He didn't want to admit it, but deep down, he knew he was losing this argument not because he was wrong, but because he was afraid to believe he might be right. Tom stayed silent, his jaw tight, his pride clashing with the truth hanging in the air. Every man in the room could feel the weight of Keanu's words. Even the sound of the motorcycle seemed to fade into a quiet heartbeat, as if the whole shop were listening. Keanu's eyes softened, but his tone carried conviction. You've built your life fixing what's broken, Tom. You don't throw a machine away just because it's been damaged. You restore it, one part at a time. People aren't so different. Tom shifted his stance, pretending to check the clipboard again, though his hands trembled slightly. He looked at Derek, at the tattoos, the worn jacket, the cautious expression, and something inside him cracked. For the first time, he saw not a criminal, but a man trying to come back from the edge. Derek stood quietly, head bowed, afraid to hope. He didn't know if this was another cruel moment of almost getting there before being turned away again. Keanu glanced at him, then back to Tom. You saw what he did. He didn't lie, didn't brag, didn't take anything that wasn't his. He just fixed the problem in front of him. That's what good men do. The garage was still. Even the younger workers who'd been skeptical earlier looked uncomfortable now. Pete finally spoke, his voice hesitant. Boss, maybe we could use an extra pair of hands. We've been backed up for weeks. Tom let out a slow breath and muttered, We'll talk about it. He turned to Derek. You come by tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. sharp. We'll see if this redemption thing of yours holds up. Derek's eyes widened. He didn't smile, didn't move, just whispered, Thank you. Keanu placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Every new start begins somewhere, he said quietly. The motorcycle idled steadily beside them, its engine smooth and alive again like a symbol of something greater. Tom's reluctant words still hung in the air, but Keanu could sense they came from uncertainty, not cruelty. He took a quiet step closer to the counter, where Tom stood, and said gently, You know, there's another way to handle this. Tom frowned. Another way? Keanu nodded. There's a program I started a few years ago. It's called Ride with Heart. We train people who've been through hard times, men and women, trying to rebuild their lives after prison, addiction, or just life going sideways. They learn real mechanical skills, but more than that, they learn trust again. The workers nearby exchanged glances. They'd heard of it before, through social media or a news clip online. One whispered, That's his charity thing, right? Keanu caught the whisper but didn't react. He just kept his tone steady. We take in people like Derek, he continued, and give them structure, mentorship, and a community. No judgments, just second chances. Because everyone deserves a restart. He paused for a moment, letting his words land, before adding softly, Even engines do. Derek lifted his head slowly, disbelief written across his face. Ride with Heart, he repeated, his voice unsteady. That's yours? I saw something about that when I was inside. They showed a short video once in group therapy. I didn't think it was real. Keanu smiled faintly. It's real. Started with 6 people. Now we have more than 50 working across 3 shops. Every one of them has a story like yours. You'd fit right in. Tom looked skeptical. "That sounds good in theory," he said. "But you can't save everybody, Mr. Reeves." Keanu didn't flinch. "I'm not trying to save anyone. I just refuse to let the world waste good hands because of bad mistakes." The words silenced the room again. One of the younger mechanics, Pete, whispered to another, "Man, he actually means it." Derek stood frozen, his throat tight. No one had ever defended him before. Not like this. Not in front of others. All his life, people had either condemned him or pitied him. But Keanu was doing neither. He was offering something different. Respect. Tom rubbed his chin, clearly wrestling with the idea. "So you'd just take him? Just like that?" Keanu nodded calmly. "Not just take him, teach him, mentor him, let him earn what he wants instead of begging for it." Tom leaned back, uncertain. "You really believe people like him can change?" Keanu's eyes softened. "I don't just believe it. I've seen it." Derek tried to speak, but his voice cracked. "I don't know what to say." Keanu looked at him kindly. "Say yes. Come by tomorrow morning. We start early. Bring that determination you showed today. The rest will follow." Derek blinked hard, his vision blurring. He nodded slowly, unable to hold back the emotion rising in his chest. "I'll be there," he whispered. "I swear I'll be there." Tom turned away, pretending to be busy, but even he couldn't hide the flicker of admiration in his expression. Keanu placed his tools back on the bench, wiped his hands clean, and offered Derek a quiet smile. "Good," he said softly. "Let's see what redemption sounds like when it starts its engine." For a moment, no one spoke. The garage was filled only with the low hum of the motorcycle cooling beside them, its metal ticking softly in the silence. Derek stood still, trying to process what had just happened. A man he had only seen in movies had just offered him something no one else ever had a genuine second chance. Keanu glanced around at the mechanics, watching from their workstations. Some of them shifted uncomfortably, others nodded faintly, though none dared speak. He could feel the quiet tension that always came when people were asked to look beyond what they saw. Tom finally broke the silence. "You're serious about this program of yours?" Keanu nodded. "Completely. We've built a training facility in East LA. We take people who've served time and teach them everything about repair work, motorcycles, cars, even restoration projects. The work is hands-on, and it's tough, but the ones who stick with it walk out with real skills and a new start." Tom frowned, arms crossed. "And you just trust them? Just like that?" Keanu tilted his head slightly. "Trust isn't something you hand out. It's something you build. Every person who walks through our doors starts by cleaning floors, organizing tools, shadowing someone who knows more. You earn responsibility one bolt at a time." Derek listened, his heart pounding. The words hit him harder than he expected. It wasn't charity, this was dignity. It wasn't someone saving him. It was someone believing that he could save himself. Tom exhaled, glancing toward Derek. "You're really willing to put your name behind him? Someone you met an hour ago?" Keanu smiled faintly. "Names don't matter. Actions do." The tone was so simple, so sincere, that it disarmed the cynicism hanging in the room. One of the younger mechanics muttered quietly, "Wish more people thought like that." Keanu stepped closer to Derek. "Tell me something," he said softly. "When was the last time someone gave you a real chance?" Derek shook his head, eyes glassy. "I don't know. Maybe never." "Then tomorrow," Keanu said. "That changes." The words carried no grandstanding, no applause, just certainty. It felt like a promise that the universe itself had been waiting for. Tom leaned back against the counter, uneasy but moved. "I gotta admit," he said, "that's a brave thing you're doing. Most folks don't stick their necks out for people like him." Keanu turned toward him. "We've forgotten that people are allowed to become better than their mistakes." Tom said nothing. There was no argument left. Derek finally found his voice again, trembling but sincere. "I won't waste this. I swear I won't." Keanu nodded once. "You don't have to convince me. Just show up. That's the first step." Tom cleared his throat and muttered, "If you really plan to take him, you'd better make sure he's worth it." Keanu smiled gently. "That's exactly what I intend to do." He turned back toward his motorcycle, adjusting his gloves before kicking the stand up. The bike gleamed under the light, fixed, tuned, restored, just like the man who had fixed it. Standing beside it now, reborn in quiet disbelief, Derek stood there long after the sound of the engine faded. His hands were still trembling, though not from fear this time. Something new was moving inside him, hope, cautious but alive. He had spent years dreaming of a day when someone might see past his record, past his mistakes, to the person he was trying to become. And now, that day had come. Keanu reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small business card. It was simple, white, with a faint silver imprint that read, "Ride with Heart, Vocational Training and Mentorship." He handed it to Derek. "That address on the back?" Keanu said. "Be there at sunrise. Don't worry about what you don't have. Just bring the will to work." Derek stared at the card, his eyes glistening. He could barely get the words out. I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to," Keanu said softly. "You'll pay it forward someday. That's how it works." Tom stood a few feet away, arms crossed, his expression caught between pride and disbelief. He cleared his throat and said, "You show up tomorrow, kid, and maybe I'll stop betting against you." Derek nodded, gripping the card tightly like it was his last lifeline. "I'll be there, I promise." Keanu smiled gently. "Good. Because the hardest part of rebuilding isn't fixing what's broken, it's believing it can run again." The words settled. Deep inside Derek's chest, he felt something shift, like a spark finally catching after years of cold silence. As Keanu mounted his motorcycle, the late afternoon sun reflected off the polished chrome, casting long streaks of gold across the garage floor. He looked back once more and said, "See you tomorrow, Derek, bright and early." Derek watched him ride off down the street, the sound of the engine fading into the distance. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like a man running from his past. He felt like a man finally driving toward his future. The next morning, the city was still half asleep when Derek stepped off the early bus and walked toward the address printed on the card. The air smelled of dew and asphalt, and the rising sun cast a soft glow over the quiet industrial street. He clutched his worn duffel bag, his heart pounding faster with every step. Ahead stood a wide metal building painted matte black, with a large sign above the doors that read, "Ride with Heart." He hesitated for a moment before pushing the door open. The sound that greeted him wasn't the chaos of a busy repair shop, but a calm, focused rhythm, tools clicking, engines humming, voices steady. Inside, the workshop was larger than he imagined. Dozens of motorcycles lined the space, some pristine, some stripped down to their frames. Men and women worked side by side, each wearing matching gray work shirts with the Foundation's logo stitched above the pocket. A tall man with dark hair and warm eyes approached him, smiling. "You must be Derek," Keanu said, his tone casual, almost like greeting an old friend. "Glad you made it on time." Derek nodded, trying not to show how nervous he was. "Wouldn't miss it," he replied quietly. Keanu led him deeper into the shop. "Let me show you around." They passed several workstations. One man, missing 2 fingers, was helping a young woman align a chain sprocket. Another trainee, with tattoos running up his neck, was polishing chrome, humming to himself. There was no judgment here, no whispers about who had been where or what they had done, only the steady sound of people working, learning, rebuilding. "This place is different," Derek murmured. Keanu nodded. "We fix more than motorcycles here," he said. "We fix people's faith in themselves." The words hit Derek harder than he expected. He swallowed, his throat tight. Keanu pointed to an open bay near the far wall. "That'll be your station. You'll start by shadowing Luis. He's been with us a little over a year. Knows his way around just about anything with an engine." Luis, a broad-shouldered man with kind eyes, walked over and extended his hand. "Welcome, brother," he said. "Don't worry. We all started the same way, unsure, scared, but ready to fight for something better." Derek shook his hand firmly. "Thanks. I'll learn fast." "I know you will," Luis replied with a smile. "Now, grab those gloves. We've got a lot of grease and a lot of lessons ahead." As the morning went on, Derek found himself immersed in the rhythm of the place. He learned how to disassemble a carburetor correctly, how to replace spark plugs without stripping the threads, and how to work as part of a team, something he hadn't done since before prison. Every mistake was met, not with anger, but with guidance. When lunch came, he sat with the other trainees at a long wooden table. They laughed, shared stories, and passed around sandwiches wrapped in paper. Derek listened more than he spoke, realizing that every person there carried their own scars. But here, those scars weren't warnings, they were proof of survival. By afternoon, Derek's muscles ached. His hands were sore, and his shirt was streaked with grease. But for the first time in years, he felt something close to pride. The noise of the workshop had become almost musical to him. The rhythmic hum of drills, the clatter of sockets on metal, the crace of the flour, faint laughter from other trainees. It wasn't just a garage, it was a heartbeat, steady and alive. Keanu moved between workstations, offering quiet guidance. He didn't bark orders or act like a celebrity giving charity. He was part of the work, sleeves rolled up, wiping sweat from his brow just like everyone else. He leaned over a trainee's shoulder, showing her how to calibrate a torque wrench, then turned to check Derek's progress. "How's it going over here?" Keanu asked. Derek straightened up, wiping his hands on a rag. "I stripped a bolt," he admitted, holding up the small damaged screw. Keanu smiled, not disappointed. "Happens to everyone. You know what the first rule of this shop is?" Derek shook his head. "Failure's part of the fix. Every engine, every person, you can't rebuild anything without breaking a few pieces first." The words hit deeper than they should have. Derek nodded slowly, pocketing the ruined bolt like a reminder. "Got it." They spent the next hour working side by side. Keanu explained small techniques, how to hear misfires, how to adjust carburetors by feel, how to know when to stop tightening before a part gives way. It wasn't glamorous. It was patient, quiet work. But it built something more important than skill: trust. Around them, the other trainees laughed and shouted to one another. Luis teased a younger recruit about dropping a wrench on his boot. Two women practiced paint detailing on a vintage Harley. It was loud, messy, full of energy, yet every sound felt purposeful, like the room itself was healing one heartbeat at a time. When the shift ended, Keanu gathered everyone near the main workstation. He stood on a crate, looking over the group not as a star, but as a mentor. "I know some of you have been told you don't deserve a second chance," he said. "I was told the same thing once, in my own way. But the truth is, redemption isn't a gift. It's a job. You show up every day, even when it hurts, even when no one's watching. That's how you rebuild." The room was quiet except for the distant ticking of cooling engines. Derek felt those words land inside him like sparks. He wasn't being pitied, he was being challenged. Keanu looked over at him for a brief moment, nodding as if to say, "You belong here." Derek nodded back, his heart steady. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in years, he wanted to find out. As the lights dimmed and the crew cleaned up, he helped Luis sweep the floor. It wasn't glamorous work, but he found himself smiling. He was tired, sore, and filthy, but alive. When Keanu passed by on his way out, he clapped a hand on Derek's shoulder. "Good work today. Same time tomorrow?" "Yes, sir," Derek said, grinning through the exhaustion. "Don't call me sir," Keanu said gently. "We're equals here." Derek paused, surprised by the words. "All right, Keanu, I'll be here." And as the door closed behind him, Derek realized something he hadn't felt in years. He wasn't starting over alone. Days turned into weeks, and the rhythm of Ride with Heart became Derek's new life. He woke up before sunrise, caught the same early bus, and arrived before anyone else to sweep the floors and prepare the tools. At first, it was just habit, a way to stay useful, but over time, it became something deeper. He cared about the place. It wasn't just a workshop anymore. It was home. Keanu watched his progress quietly, rarely offering praise outright, but always noticing the details. When Derek stayed late to help a struggling trainee rebuild a carburetor, Keanu saw. When Derek fixed a wiring issue without being asked, he saw that too. But what impressed him most wasn't the skill, it was the way Derek listened, guided, and encouraged others. One Friday afternoon, Keanu gathered the group again. "A year ago, most of you didn't believe you'd ever hold a steady job," he said, looking around the room. "Now look at you. You don't just build bikes, you build confidence." The crew applauded, and someone shouted, "Speech, Derek!" Caught off guard, Derek laughed and rubbed the back of his neck. "I don't know what to say," he admitted. "A few months ago, I couldn't even get someone to look me in the eye. Now, I work with people who believe in me before I believe in myself. That changes a man." Keanu smiled, pride glinting in his eyes. "That's what I was hoping to hear." As the group dispersed, Keanu lingered behind, watching Derek help a new trainee adjust a chain. He saw patience in his movements, quiet confidence in his tone. Luis walked by and whispered to Keanu, "He's becoming a leader here, you know." Keanu nodded. He already is. Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, its glow reflecting off rows of polished motorcycles. Inside, laughter echoed through the garage, proof that redemption wasn't just an idea anymore. It was alive, breathing, and working one wrench at a time. The evening sun burned low, painting the Ride with Heart workshop in shades of gold and rust. Derek was locking up, the last one to leave as usual. He always stayed late, double-checking the tools, wiping down the workbenches, making sure everything was ready for the next day. It wasn't part of his job, but he did it anyway. It was his quiet way of giving back to the place that had given him everything. The lot outside was empty, except for his old bus pass fluttering in his pocket and the faint sound of traffic beyond the chain-link fence. As he pulled the garage door halfway down, a voice called out from the shadows, "Yo, D, that you?" Derek froze. He knew that voice instantly, even after all these months. Ray Johnson. They'd grown up on the same block, run in the same circles, and eventually served time in the same cell block, though Ray hadn't learned much from it. "Man, I thought I'd find you here," Ray said, stepping into the orange glow of the streetlight. He looked almost the same swagger, same smirk, but harder now, thinner. "Heard you've been playing mechanic with movie stars." Derek exhaled slowly. "Ray, what are you doing here?" "Just checking in, bro. Word gets around. Everyone's saying you went soft, working legit now," he chuckled. "Didn't think you'd trade the streets for socket wrenches." Derek closed the door behind him, locking it fully. "That life's behind me." Ray shrugged, grinning. Sure. But you know, it's funny you say that, but I still see the same man who could break down a car in under an hour." Derek didn't smile. "People change. Maybe. But cash doesn't." Ray stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Listen, I've got something lined up. Real easy. Couple of old friends are moving parts out of a warehouse down by the docks. Big payout. No risk. You in?" Derek's stomach tightened. It was like hearing an echo from another lifetime familiar, tempting, dangerous. The old him would have said yes before Ray finished the sentence. Fast money, no questions, no responsibility. But now he had something to lose. "I'm done with that," Derek said firmly. Ray laughed, shaking his head. "Come on, man. Don't act like you're better than the rest of us. What's that actor paying you anyway? Enough to eat, maybe? You really think he's gonna keep you around once the cameras stop rolling?" Derek looked away, his hands curling into fists. The workshop behind him seemed to hum in silence, like a reminder of everything he'd built these past months. "You should go, Ray," he said quietly. Ray's grin faded. "Don't tell me you bought into that redemption crap. You and we don't get clean slates. Not in this world." Derek's chest tightened. He could feel the pull of his past like a chain, cold and heavy. Ray's words dug deep, because part of him still believed them. But another part, the part Keanu had helped rebuild, was fighting to breathe. He didn't answer. He just stood there, torn between who he'd been and who he was trying to become. That's when the door behind him creaked open again. A warm light spilled out onto the lot. "Everything okay out here?" It was Keanu. The sound of Keanu's voice sliced through the tension. Both men turned. Keanu stood in the doorway, the soft workshop light behind him outlining his calm, steady presence. He didn't look surprised, just quietly aware, like he had seen this moment coming from a mile away. Derek straightened up, wiping his palms on his jeans. "Yeah, all good," he said quickly. But Keanu's eyes moved from Derek to Ray, reading the body language between them like an open book. "You sure?" he asked gently. Ray sized Keanu up, smirking. "So this is him, huh? The famous Keanu Reeves. Didn't think Hollywood folks liked getting their hands dirty." Keanu didn't flinch. "Sometimes the only way to clean things up is to get your hands dirty," he said evenly. Ray chuckled. "Nice line. You use that in a movie?" Keanu didn't respond. He just stepped closer, his gaze firm but not hostile. "I think you should go, friend. It's getting late." Ray shrugged, spreading his hands in mock innocence. "Hey, I'm just talking to an old buddy. No harm in that." Keanu turned slightly toward Derek. "Is that what this is?" Derek hesitated. The old reflexes were there, the loyalty, the fear of looking weak in front of someone from his past. "He's just someone I used to know." Ray's grin widened. "Used to, huh? Don't tell me this guy's got you believing you're someone new now." Keanu spoke quietly, but firmly. He doesn't have to believe it. He's already living it. For a moment, no one spoke. Ray looked from Keanu to Derek, his expression shifting from amusement to frustration. "Man, I can't believe this," he said. "You really think this guy's gonna save you? He's rich, famous. He'll move on, and you'll be right back where you started." Derek clenched his jaw. "He's not saving me. I'm saving myself. He just gave me the chance." That simple sentence hit Ray harder than anything else could have. His smirk faltered. He stepped back, the bravado fading into something that looked almost like disappointment. "Guess prison really did change you," he muttered. "Yeah," Derek said softly. "It did." Keanu stayed silent, watching the two men, letting Derek find his own strength. He could see it, the inner war between the life Derek once knew and the one he was building now. Ray shook his head and started backing away toward the fence. "You know where to find me if this Saint Act falls apart," he said. "You can't outrun what you are forever." Derek didn't answer. He just stood there, jaw tight, eyes fixed on the ground, until Ray's footsteps faded into the night. Keanu walked up beside him, his tone calm but carrying weight. "You okay?" Derek nodded, though his voice wavered. "Yeah, just hard seeing ghosts from the past." Keanu looked out toward the dark street. The past has a way of showing up when it knows you're moving on. It wants to see if you'll turn back. Derek's eyes met his. "And what do you do when it does?" Keanu's reply was quiet, but certain. "You remind it that it doesn't live here anymore." Derek exhaled, the tension easing from his shoulders. For the first time, he didn't feel like he was running from his past. He felt like he was walking away from it. The street had gone quiet again, the hum of traffic distant and low. Derek stood beside Keanu, the cool night breeze carrying the faint scent of motor oil and asphalt. He looked down at his hands, hands that once stole, fought, and broke, and felt the difference. They weren't fists anymore. They were tools for building. Keanu leaned against the doorway, watching him quietly. "You handled that well," he said. Derek let out a shaky laugh. "Didn't feel like it. For a second I almost went back. Part of me still wants to. That part never really disappears," Keanu said softly. "But it gets quieter, the more you feed what's right instead." Derek nodded, his eyes fixed on the pavement. "It's crazy. I used to think I didn't have a choice, that people like me were just meant to mess up forever." Keanu shook his head. "That's what they want you to think. The system tells you you're finished. But the truth is, redemption doesn't come from permission. It comes from persistence." Derek breathed out slowly, the words grounding him. He thought of the workshop, the sound of engines, the people who depended on him now. He thought of Luis, of the younger trainees looking up to him. If he fell now, he wouldn't just lose his progress. He'd take their hope with him. He looked back at Keanu. You really believe people can change, don't you? Keanu smiled faintly. I don't believe it. I've seen it. Every day in that shop. Derek nodded, his chest tightening with emotion. Thank you for showing up when you did. Keanu gave his shoulder a firm pat. Just keep showing up for yourself. That's what matters. They walked back toward the workshop, locking up the final door. The lights dimmed behind them, but something in Derek's eyes burned brighter. He had been tested, and this time, he'd chosen light over darkness. The months that followed moved like steady gears turning in a well-tuned engine. Every day, Derek showed up early at Ride with Heart, unlocking the doors before sunrise, checking tools, wiping down the benches. The once nervous ex-convict who couldn't meet anyone's eyes now carried himself with quiet purpose. The others noticed it. He didn't have to talk much. His work spoke for him. The first paycheck came on a Friday afternoon. It wasn't much, just enough to cover bus fare, groceries, and a little extra. But when he held that envelope in his hands, it felt heavier than gold. For the first time in years, the money was clean, earned, not taken. He stood outside the workshop for a long moment before opening it, letting the memory sink in. That evening, he walked into a thrift store and bought 2 pairs of work jeans, a few plain shirts, and a pair of boots that actually fit. The cashier smiled when she handed him the change, but she couldn't possibly know what that small transaction meant to him. To Derek, it was proof that he could live without the shadows. A week later, he rented a small apartment in a quiet part of town. It wasn't fancy, just a single room with a flickering light and a window overlooking the street. But when he turned the key and stepped inside, it was his. No halfway house, no guard checks, no metal bars. Just a place to breathe. He furnished it with what little he could afford. A second-hand bed, a small table, and an old bit coffee maker. But the pride he felt each night as he locked his own door was something he couldn't put into words. The silence wasn't loneliness anymore, it was peace. Back at the workshop, Keanu began to notice the change in him. Derek's shoulders were no longer weighed down. His tone had softened, and the haunted look in his eyes had been replaced with something else: steadiness. One afternoon, after the crew had finished for the day, Keanu approached him near the back lot. "You've been doing good work," he said. Derek smiled modestly. "Trying to keep up with Louise." Keanu shook his head. "You've passed him in something more important." Derek looked confused. "What's that?" "Consistency," Keanu said. "The way you show up every day, the way you help without being asked. That's leadership, Derek. You've earned people's respect." Derek stared down at the grease-stained floor, unsure what to say. "I'm just doing what you taught me." Keanu smiled faintly. "Then, it's time you teach someone else." Derek blinked in surprise. "Teach someone else?" he asked. "I'm still learning myself," Keanu nodded. "That's the best time to teach. You still remember what it feels like to struggle. You haven't forgotten how hard the first step was." He placed a hand on Derek's shoulder, his tone steady and encouraging. "Someone out there is walking the same road you did. Help them find their footing." The idea both scared and inspired him. Derek had spent his whole life being told what to do, never trusted with responsibility, never seen as someone worth learning from. But now, Keanu was telling him he had something worth sharing. A few days later, the opportunity came. A new trainee arrived at Ride with Heart, a young man named Travis, who couldn't have been more than 23. He had just finished probation and carried the same look Derek once had, eyes always darting, hands always fidgeting. Like every second, he expected someone to accuse him of something. Luis introduced them. "Travis, this is Derek. He's been here a while. You stick close to him. He'll keep you out of trouble." Travis gave a nervous nod. "Yes, sir." Derek laughed softly. "Don't call me sir. I'm just another guy trying to stay on track." The first few days weren't easy. Travis was clumsy, impatient, and defensive whenever corrected. Derek recognized himself in every one of those reactions. Instead of scolding, he stayed calm. "Take a breath," he'd say. "You don't have to prove you're perfect. You just have to keep trying." Slowly, the walls began to fall. Travis started asking questions. trusting Derek's guidance. They worked side by side rebuilding an old Honda, and by the time the engine finally purred back to life, Travis looked at Derek with genuine admiration. "You really think a guy like me can make it?" he asked. Derek smiled. "You already are." That night, as the crew locked up, Keanu watched them from across the room. He didn't interrupt, he just smiled quietly, watching Derek walk the same path he once guided him through. He saw the ripple effect in motion. One life restoring another. Weeks passed, and Derek's role grew naturally. He became the person the others went to when they couldn't figure something out. He stayed late to help clean, checked in on trainees who looked like they were struggling, and always reminded them that messing up wasn't failure. It was part of the rebuild. During one team meeting, Keanu stood in front of the group. "You all know Derek," he said. "He came here months ago just looking for a job. Now, he's helping others find purpose. That's what this place is about." The room filled with applause. Derek looked down, embarrassed, but Keanu caught his eye and nodded proudly. "Redemption isn't about forgetting the past," Keanu said. "It's about using it to build something stronger." Later that evening, as the sun dipped low and the garage lights buzzed softly, Derek sat on the front steps of the workshop. The air smelled of gasoline and summer rain. He thought about his old friend Ray, about the road he could have taken, and how close he'd come to throwing it all away. Keanu walked out and sat beside him, quietly for a while. "You've come a long way," he said finally. Derek nodded. "Yeah, but I'm just getting started." Keanu smiled. "Good, because the world needs more people who know what it means to rebuild." The hum of the workshop faded behind them, replaced by the steady rhythm of hope, a sound that no engine could ever match. It started quietly, like most good things do. One afternoon, a woman in a denim jacket and camera bag walked into the Ride with Heart workshop. Her name was Melissa Carter, a journalist for a human interest magazine based in Los Angeles. She had heard about the foundation through a community outreach program and wanted to see it for herself. Keanu greeted her at the entrance, wiping his hands on a cloth. "Welcome," he said with a calm smile. "You're free to look around. Just watch your step. The floor gets slick." Melissa smiled back. "Thanks. I've heard incredible things about this place. A mechanic training program for ex-convicts, that's not something you see every day." Keanu shrugged modestly. "We're not trying to make headlines. We're just helping people rebuild what's been broken." Melissa began walking through the workshop, taking photos of the trainees at work. The smell of motor oil, the rhythmic hum of engines, and the laughter echoing through the room made the place feel alive. Everyone she spoke to had a story. Stories of mistakes, of lost time, of learning to trust again. But when she reached Derek's workstation, something about his focus drew her in. He was helping Travis, the young trainee he had been mentoring, tighten a chain on an old Yamaha. His tone was patient, steady, encouraging. "No, not too tight," Derek said. "You want it to move freely. Everything's about balance." Melissa waited until they finished, then approached him. "You must be Derek Hayes," she said. "Keanu told me you've been with the program for a while." Derek looked up, surprised to be singled out. "Yeah, that's me. Guess word gets around. I'm writing an article about Ride with Heart," she explained. "Would you mind answering a few questions?" He hesitated. "I'm not good at interviews," she smiled reassuringly. "Don't worry, I just want to know what it's really like here." Derek glanced toward Keanu, who gave a small nod from across the room. Taking a breath, he wiped his hands and gestured toward the bench. "Sure, what do you want to know?" Melissa pulled out her recorder and asked, "What's it like working for Keanu Reeves?" Derek smiled faintly. "He doesn't make you feel like you work for him," he said. "You work with him. That's the difference. He doesn't look at you like a project. He looks at you like a person." Melissa's eyebrows lifted. "That's beautiful." Derek shrugged, modest. "It's just the truth. He gave me a chance when no one else would. Not because I deserved it, but because he believed I could be better." As Melissa continued asking questions, the rest of the crew quietly listened from a distance. They weren't used to outsiders caring about their stories. For most of them, This was the first time anyone wanted to hear about their progress, not their past. When the interview ended, Melissa shook Derek's hand. "Thank you," she said sincerely. "People need to hear this." Derek smiled, wiping a streak of grease off his forearm. "Just make sure you tell them it's not about fame. It's about family." Melissa nodded. "I will." 2 weeks later, the article went live. The headline read, "Keanu Reeves and his Ride with Heart program are giving ex-convicts a second chance at life." Within hours, it began spreading across social media. Photos of the workshop filled screens across America. Derek smiling beside a motorcycle, Travis holding a wrench mid-repair, Keanu laughing with the team. The story struck a chord with readers everywhere. People were moved by the honesty in Derek's words, especially one quote that Melissa had highlighted in bold. "He doesn't make you feel like you work for him. You work with him." That single line became a symbol of humility and leadership. Soon, the Foundation's email inbox overflowed with messages from strangers, mechanics from across email. The country offered to volunteer their time. Tool companies donated sets of equipment. Motorcycle enthusiasts shipped used bikes to be rebuilt for charity auctions. A small community college in Texas even reached out to start a partnership, offering scholarships for graduates of Ride with Heart. Within a month, donations poured in not just money, but hope. One woman from Ohio wrote, "My brother came out of prison last year. I wish he had a place like this. Thank you for showing the world that redemption is real." At the workshop, the impact was immediate. New trainees arrived every week, men and women who had heard Derek's story and wanted to start their own. Derek helped register them, gave them tours, and introduced them to Keanu like an older brother showing off his family. But through all the attention, Keanu remained grounded. When reporters began calling for TV interviews, he politely declined. When talk shows invited him to discuss the project, he turned them down too. "It's not about me," he told Melissa when she called to thank him for the article's success. "It's about what happens when someone believes in you. That's the story worth telling." Melissa smiled through the phone. "You know, you could use the attention to expand your work. People want to hear from you." "I appreciate that," Keanu replied. "But if I talk too much, people will stop listening to them, and they're the ones who deserve to be heard." Meanwhile, Derek tried to stay humble despite the new spotlight. One afternoon, a group of college students visited the workshop for a community outreach project. When they asked for a photo, Derek laughed nervously. "I'm no celebrity," he said. "I'm just a guy who's grateful someone gave him a wrench instead of a warning." That night, as the last of the crew headed home, Keanu walked over and leaned against the workbench beside him. "How does it feel?" he asked. Derek grinned, shaking his head. "Surreal. All this attention because I said one honest thing." Keanu smiled. "Sometimes, honesty is what the world needs most." Derek looked around at the humming workshop, at the people working late just because they loved what they were building. "Feels like something bigger than us," he said. "It is," Keanu replied. "You started a ripple, Derek, and you have no idea how far it's going to reach." The shop lights flickered softly above them, illuminating rows of rebuilt motorcycles lined up like new beginnings. Outside, the city buzzed with noise and motion, but inside, Ride with Heart, the sound that filled the air, was steady and strong, the rhythm of redemption continuing to grow. The wave of attention that had lifted Ride with Heart soon brought with it an unexpected undertow. As the story spread online, so did the opinions, both good and bad. Thousands of people praised Keanu and the team for giving ex-convicts a chance, but not everyone saw it that way. A few headlines started circulating on social media. "Keanu Reeves employs criminals in his workshop," and "Hollywood star's risky redemption program under fire." Anonymous commenters filled forums with harsh words, questioning why a movie star would trust people with a record around expensive equipment and donations. Some even accused him of being naive or dangerously idealistic. Soon, local sponsors who had supported the foundation began getting nervous. One business owner called Keanu's assistant to express concern. "We respect what he's doing," the man said carefully, "but this kind of publicity might hurt our image." Maybe he should tone it down, keep the focus off the ex-cons. Keanu listened to every call, every email, and every word of criticism. But he never raised his voice. He knew this would come eventually. Change always makes people uncomfortable, he told Luis one afternoon. They'd rather see a problem from a distance than stand close enough to fix it. The tension reached its peak when a local politician made a statement during a televised town meeting. "I admire Mr. Reeves's compassion," the man said, "but hiring convicted felons around the public is reckless. Rehabilitation is a noble idea, but it should happen behind closed doors, not in our neighborhoods." The comment spread quickly online, clipped into videos, and reposted across social media. People debated endlessly, some defending Keanu, others mocking him. The workshop that once felt like a haven now carried an air of unease. New trainees worried that the backlash might end the program. Derek noticed the tension building in everyone's faces. Conversations were shorter, laughter was quieter. He saw Keanu sitting alone in the office one night, looking over paperwork with a furrowed brow. For the first time since joining Ride with Heart, Derek sensed something heavy pressing on his mentor's shoulders. He walked up to the open door. "You okay?" Keanu looked up, offering a tired smile. "I'm fine. Just figuring out how to keep the sponsors on board." Derek frowned. "They're threatening to pull out?" "Some of them," Keanu admitted. "People like what we're doing until they realize who we're doing it for." Derek sat across from him. "So what are you gonna do?" Keanu leaned back, his tone calm but firm. "The same thing I've done since the start. Keep the doors open. People who've fallen need a hand, not a headline." Derek nodded slowly. "Then maybe it's time someone else speaks up for you." The next morning, Derek arrived early and found the workshop unusually quiet. Normally, the crew buzzed with energy tools clanging, jokes flying, but today, everyone moved slower, glancing at the news on their phones. The headlines had gotten worse overnight. One article accused Ride with Heart of being a ticking time bomb run by criminals. Another suggested that the city should investigate the program's funding. Luis tossed his phone onto the workbench. "They make it sound like we're running some kind of scam," he said bitterly. "They don't even know us." Derek took a deep breath. "Then maybe it's time they do." When Keanu walked in, Derek was already waiting for him. "We can't stay silent anymore," Derek said. "People are twisting what this place really is. Let me talk. Let them hear from someone who's lived it." Keanu hesitated. "The media isn't always kind. They'll try to twist your words too." "I know," Derek said, meeting his eyes. "But if I don't speak up, they'll only hear lies. You gave me a chance to prove I could change. Let me prove it again." Keanu studied him for a long moment before nodding slowly. "All right, if you're sure, I'll stand with you." That afternoon, Derek stood outside the workshop gates, surrounded by reporters. Cameras flashed, microphones extended, voices shouted questions about the controversy. Keanu stood off to the side, quiet, letting Derek have the floor. Derek cleared his throat and spoke into the microphone. His voice trembled at first, but grew stronger with every word.
"A year ago, I was sleeping in bus stations.
I couldn't get a job because every door slammed in my face. Then this man, Keanu Reeves, looked me in the eye and said, 'Everyone deserves a restart.' And he meant it." The crowd quieted. He continued, "If he hadn't believed in me, I'd probably be back behind bars, or worse. But instead, I'm here. I fix engines. I teach others how to rebuild. Not just bikes, but lives." A reporter called out, "Aren't you worried about public safety? Some people say programs like this are too risky." Derek shook his head. "You think risk is letting someone work? Risk is giving up on people and leaving them nothing to lose. What we're doing here saves lives. I've seen it." The silence that followed was different this time, heavy, but thoughtful. The camera zoomed in on Derek's face, the sincerity in his eyes impossible to ignore. Keanu stepped forward, placing a hand on Derek's shoulder. His voice was calm, steady. "I don't blame people for being afraid," he said. "Fear is easy. Belief is harder. But every one of these people has earned my trust. And if I can trust them, maybe the world can too. The crowd erupted in applause. What started as a controversy began to turn into a movement. That night, clips of Derek's speech flooded the internet. Comments poured in, thousands of them words of support, of gratitude, of hope. A retired police officer wrote, "I've seen what prison does to people. What Keanu and Derek are doing is what real justice looks like." A single mother commented, "My son just got out. We need more places like this." By morning, number Ride with Heart was trending nationwide. Sponsors who had withdrawn called back to reinstate their funding. Community centers requested partnerships. The same voices that once doubted them now wanted to help. Keanu watched it all unfold quietly. When Derek approached him later that day, unsure what to say, Keanu simply smiled. "You turned backlash into belief," he said. "That's what leadership looks like." Derek looked around at the team, at the laughter, the work, the light returning to the workshop, and for the first time, he truly understood what it meant to rebuild more than engines. A full year had passed since Derek first walked in to Ride with Heart. What once began as a workshop filled with uncertainty had grown into a thriving community. The walls, once plain and bare, now carried framed photos of rebuilt bikes and smiling faces. Each picture told a story of transformation, men and women who came in with doubt and left with dignity. That morning, sunlight streamed through the wide garage doors as folding chairs were set up in neat rows. A small stage stood at the front, draped in a simple banner that read, "Ride with Heart Graduation, Class 1. The hum of anticipation filled the room. Families, friends, and local reporters gathered, cameras ready to capture a moment that symbolized far more than just the completion of a training program. Derek stood near the back, straightening his new shirt. He couldn't stop fidgeting with his sleeves. Luis, standing beside him, laughed softly. "You look like you're about to meet the president." Derek grinned nervously. "Feels like it. I haven't worn anything this clean since. I don't even remember." "Enjoy it," Luis said, clapping him on the shoulder. "You earned every bit of it." Keanu moved through the crowd, shaking hands, greeting families, and helping adjust the sound system. He didn't act like a celebrity hosting an event. He acted like a proud mentor watching his team take their next step. As the ceremony began, a quiet fell over the room. Keanu stepped up to the microphone. "When we started this program," he began, "we didn't have much. Just a few bikes, a few tools, and a lot of faith. Today, we have something more valuable than all of that proof that second chances work." The audience applauded warmly. Cameras flashed, but Keanu didn't flinch. His focus stayed on the rows of trainees sitting before him, each wearing a black work shirt with their name embroidered over the heart. He continued, "Every person in this room has faced something that could be and have broken them. But instead, you chose to rebuild. You didn't just repair machines. You repaired trust. You rebuilt hope." The applause grew louder this time. A few family members wiped away tears. Keanu smiled, then motioned toward the table beside him, stacked with certificates. Now it's time to recognize that hard work. One by one, he began calling names. Each graduate walked up, shaking hands, receiving their certificates as the audience clapped. When he finally reached Derek's name, the room erupted in cheers. "Derek Hayes," Keanu announced, his voice proud but warm. "One of the first to walk through our doors, and one of the finest examples of what this place stands for." Derek rose slowly, heart pounding, and walked toward the stage. Every step felt like a lifetime compressed into a moment. He saw faces smiling, heard applause ringing, but it all blurred into one feeling: gratitude. When he reached Keanu, the applause grew louder. Keanu handed him the certificate with both hands. "You're proof that second chances work," Keanu said, his voice steady and full of respect. Derek held the paper, his fingers trembling. "You didn't just give me a job," he said quietly. "You gave me back my life." The applause thundered through the workshop, echoing off the walls that had once known only the sound of engines. Derek stood frozen for a moment, overwhelmed, his eyes glistening as Keanu handed him the certificate. For years, he had lived with a name tied to mistakes. But now, that same name was being called with pride. Keanu smiled and placed a hand on Derek's shoulder. "You earned this," he said. "Every hour, every drop of sweat. This paper isn't a gift, it's a reflection of your work." Derek nodded, his voice tight with emotion. "I used to think the world forgot about people like me, but you didn't." "I didn't need to remember you," Keanu said softly. "You reminded the world yourself." The crowd rose to their feet, clapping, cheering. Derek turned toward the rows of trainees, families, and supporters watching him, and the sight nearly broke him. He spotted Travis standing near the front, grinning wide and giving a thumbs up. Luis whistled loudly from the back, wiping a tear with his sleeve. Keanu gestured for silence, then continued. "Today isn't just about graduation, it's about transformation. Every person in this room has proven that one mistake doesn't define a lifetime. What defines us is what we do next." The audience nodded, the truth of his words settling deep. When the ceremony ended, people lingered. Reporters took photos, children ran between the chairs, and families hugged their loved ones tightly. Derek's mother, who had quietly slipped in during the ceremony, walked up with tears streaming down her cheeks. "I can't believe this," she whispered, touching his face. "I thought I lost you." Derek hugged her tightly. "You didn't, Mom. I just had to find myself again." As the crowd began to leave, Derek stayed behind with Keanu, helping stack chairs and clear the stage. The noise faded until only the hum of a cooling fan filled the space. "You know," Derek said, looking at the empty room, "a year ago I was scared to even walk through that door. Now I don't ever want to leave." Keanu smiled, leaning against a workbench. "You don't have to. There's always a place here for you. But something tells me your story's just beginning." The paper was creased from where his fingers had gripped it too tightly. "I want to keep helping," he said. "Teach the new ones. Give them what you gave me." Keanu nodded. "That's exactly what I hoped you'd say." The lights dimmed as the sun disappeared behind the city skyline. Together they stood in the quiet workshop, the same place where a broken man once fixed a motorcycle and found his purpose. "Congratulations, Derek," Keanu said softly. "You didn't just graduate from a program, you graduated from your past." Derek smiled through the tears. "And into my future." The sound of gravel crunched beneath the tires as Keanu's black pickup truck pulled into the familiar lot. The old sign above the door still read Tom's Auto and Repair, though the paint had faded a little more since the last time Derek saw it. For a moment, he just sat there in the passenger seat, staring at the building that had once been the scene of his humiliation. Keanu glanced at him from behind the wheel. "You ready?" he asked. Derek smiled faintly, though his stomach churned. "More than I was back then." They climbed out of the truck. The air smelled of oil and heat, just like it had that day a year ago. Inside, the garage was busy mechanics moving between lifts, tools clattering, engines humming. The rhythm of work was the same, but the feeling was different now. When Tom looked up from behind the counter and saw them, his expression froze for a moment. He wiped his hands on a rag, unsure whether to smile or brace himself. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered. "Didn't think I'd ever see you two again." Keanu smiled politely. "Good to see you, Tom. Business looks busy." Tom shrugged. "Busy enough. Guess I can't complain." He hesitated, his eyes shifting to Derek. "You really came back." Derek nodded. "I did. Thought it was about time I stopped running from old ghosts." Tom set the rag aside and stepped out from behind the counter. "You've changed," he said, looking him over. "Last time I saw you, you were shaking so bad I thought you'd drop the wrench." Derek laughed softly. "Yeah, I was terrified that day. Not because you yelled, but because you said what I was afraid to admit, that no one trusted me. You were right, but not anymore." Tom exhaled slowly. "I saw the article, you know. The one about your program. Didn't think it would blow up like that. I even watched the video where you spoke to the reporters. You handled yourself better than most politicians, Derek smiled, scratching the back of his neck. Still learning to talk without stuttering, Tom chuckled. Guess you're doing all right. He paused, his tone softening. You came all this way just to rub it in? Keanu shook his head. No, Tom. We came to thank you. Tom looked confused. Thank me? For what? For starting it all, Keanu said. If you hadn't challenged him that day, he might never have shown what he was capable of. Sometimes, we don't realize we're part of someone's turning point. Tom looked down at the floor, the words catching him off guard. I was hard on him, he admitted. Too hard. You were honest, Keanu replied. And he needed that honesty to see who he wanted to become. For a moment, the air between them grew still. Tom's eyes softened as he looked at Derek again, really seeing him this time not as the man who once stumbled into his shop begging for a chance, but as someone who had earned respect the hard way. Tom crossed his arms, trying to hide the emotion creeping into his voice. So what brings you back here, really? Don't tell me this is just a social visit. Keanu smiled. In a way, it is. But also, we're expanding. We're connecting with local garages, hoping to find a few willing to give our graduates real work. Men and women who've earned a second shot. Tom raised an eyebrow. You mean, hiring them? Derek nodded. Exactly that. Tom rubbed his chin, letting the thought settle. You know, when you walked in here last year, I would have said no without blinking. Probably would have laughed at the idea. But now, he sighed, shaking his head. Now I'm not so sure. Keanu leaned on the counter, his tone gentle but firm. You've seen what one chance can do, Tom. Imagine if 10 other people got the same. Tom looked from Keanu to Derek. You really think people like me can make that kind of difference? Derek smiled. You already did, even when you didn't mean to. That day, you showed me what I had to prove. And Keanu showed me how to prove it. Tom's lips pressed together. He reached across the counter and extended his hand. Derek didn't hesitate this time. He gripped it firmly, the handshake strong and steady. I misjudged you, Tom said quietly. Guess I had my own growing up to do. Derek smiled. We all did. Keanu's voice softened. Sometimes, the best engines need the right tune-up. Tom chuckled, shaking his head. Leave it to you to turn life into a mechanic's metaphor. Keanu shrugged playfully. It's what we do best. There was a long pause, one of those moments, where no one needed to fill the silence. The air between them felt lighter. The past finally set down for good. Tom cleared his throat. Tell you what, he said. You send me a few of your guys. We'll start small, maybe 2 or 3 at first. If they're anything like Derek, I'll keep hiring. Keanu smiled. That's all we ask. Fair enough, Tom said, nodding. And Derek, if you ever want to pick up a few side jobs, my door's open. No judgments this time, Derek grinned. Appreciate that, Tom, but I think my hands are pretty full teaching the next class. Tom laughed. Yeah, I saw that coming. As they walked out toward the truck, the sun hung low over the lot, bathing everything in a soft orange glow. Derek turned back for one last look at the garage. The place that had once made him feel small now stood as proof of how far he'd come. Keanu climbed into the driver's seat and glanced at him. Feels different now, doesn't it? Yeah, Derek said quietly. Last time I left here, I was just trying to survive. This time, I'm living. Keanu smiled, starting the engine. That's what second chances are for. As they drove off, Tom watched from the doorway, arms crossed, a faint smile tugging at his lips. For the first time in years, he didn't just see grease and metal, he saw possibility. Months passed, and the workshop's success only continued to grow. What began as one man's dream had turned into something far greater, a movement that changed lives across the city. Ride with Heart had now expanded into youth outreach, offering classes for orphan teens who had nowhere else to turn. The goal wasn't just to teach mechanics, it was to teach resilience. Derek stood at the center of the new training space, a converted hangar filled with light, tools, and laughter. Rows of teenagers surrounded him, each one wearing a gray work shirt like his. They were young, some just 16, others barely 18, but their eyes carried the same hunger Derek once had, the desire to be seen, to be believed in. He leaned on a disassembled bike frame and called out, "All right, listen up. Every bolt on this bike has a purpose. You lose one, the whole thing can fall apart. Life's the same way. Every mistake, every scar, it all fits somewhere. You just gotta figure out where." The group listened intently. One kid, Marcus, raised his hand. "So, even bad stuff has a purpose?" Derek smiled. "Especially the bad stuff. That's where you learn what needs fixing." They laughed softly, but the truth in his words hung heavy in the air. For Derek, these moments mattered more than any paycheck or article. Watching these kids find confidence in their own hands reminded him daily why Keanu had started all this. During the lunch break, Keanu arrived quietly, as he often did. He didn't announce himself or draw attention. He simply stood by the doorway, watching. Derek saw him from across the room and waved him over. "Hey, boss," Derek said with a grin. "Didn't think you'd sneak in on us today." Keanu smiled. "I just came to see how my star instructor's doing." Derek chuckled, trying not to mess it up too bad. Keanu's eyes softened as he looked around. The teens were focused, laughing, helping one another. It was exactly what he envisioned, people learning to build, not just machines, but futures. "You're doing more than teaching," Keanu said quietly. "You're passing it on." Derek paused for a moment, feeling the weight of those words. "Guess that makes me the lucky one." Keanu shook his head. "No, Derek, you make your own luck. That's what they'll remember." As the day went on, Derek led a session on rebuilding carburetors. The kids worked in pairs, asking questions, making mistakes, and fixing them together. He moved between them patiently, guiding but never scolding. Every time he saw frustration in someone's eyes, he remembered his own first day and how Keanu had seen hope where everyone else saw failure. By evening, the class was wrapping up. The bikes were half assembled, the air filled with the smell of oil and effort. Derek looked over the rows of young faces and said, "You all did good work today, but remember, fixing a bike is easy. Fixing yourself takes time. Don't rush it." As they left for the night, Keanu remained in the back, quietly observing the scene. He didn't need to speak. The look in his eyes said everything, a mix of pride, peace, and the quiet satisfaction of seeing redemption ripple outward. After the class ended, Derek stayed behind, tidying up the benches while the last of the sunlight slipped through the tall windows. The sound of laughter from the teens echoed faintly down the hall as they left, their voices full of life and hope. It reminded him of his first days at Ride with Heart, nervous, uncertain, yet full of possibility. Keanu walked over, helping stack a few wrenches into a drawer. "They're learning fast," he said. "You've got a gift, Derek." Derek smiled. "Guess I learned from the best." Keanu chuckled quietly. "No, you learned from experience. The best kind of teacher there is." They worked in silence for a moment, the only sound the faint click of tools being set in place. Then Derek said, softly, "Sometimes I think about the kid I used to be the one sitting in a cell thinking life was over. If someone had told me back then that I'd be standing here teaching kids, I'd have laughed in their face." Keanu leaned against the table, arms folded. "You didn't just change your life, Derek. You changed the lives of everyone who's walked through those doors after you. Redemption has a way of multiplying when it's real." Derek nodded, his throat tight. "I just hope these kids never have to learn the hard way like I did." Keanu smiled. "They don't have to. You already did it for them." The lights dimmed automatically, leaving the warm glow of the setting sun pouring through the windows. Outside, the sound of motorcycles from the main workshop drifted in a familiar, comforting rhythm. One of the younger students, Marcus, peeked back through the door. "Hey, Derek," he called. "Can we come early tomorrow to keep working on the Yamaha?" Derek grinned. "Yeah, of course. Just don't burn yourselves out." Marcus laughed. "You sound like Mr. Reeves now." Keanu raised an eyebrow. "That's a compliment, right?" The boy laughed again and disappeared down the hall. Derek and Keanu exchanged a knowing look, both smiling. "You see?" Keanu said quietly. "That's the sound of change. Not applause, not headlines, just kids laughing, learning, and believing." Derek looked out at the fading light and nodded slowly. You know, when you first offered me that chance, I thought you were saving me. But now I get it. You were showing me how to save others. Keanu placed a hand on his shoulder, his voice gentle. That's what it's all about. As they turned off the lights and stepped outside, the evening air carried the scent of oil, sweat, and hope, the perfume of hard work and rebirth. Behind them, the workshop glowed faintly in the dark, a beacon for anyone still searching for their second chance. It began with a single headline that spread like wildfire across the country. The Keanu Reeves Redemption Project: How One Man's Faith is Rebuilding Lives. Major news outlets picked up the story, followed by podcasts, talk shows, and social media movements. Clips from the workshop, young people fixing motorcycles, Derek guiding students through repairs, and Keanu laughing quietly in the background, filled screens everywhere. People were amazed by what they saw. The program wasn't about fame or charity photo ops. It was about grit, trust, and second chances. Journalists called it revolutionary. Commentators labeled Keanu the quiet reformer. But whenever cameras turned to him for comment, he deflected the attention. I'm not the hero here, Keanu said during an interview outside the workshop. Heroes are the ones who don't give up on themselves. I just gave them a place to start over. The humility in his tone struck audiences even harder than any headline. He never talked about money, or management, or structure. He talked about people, those who fell, those who stood again, and those who reached back to help the next person rise. Meanwhile, Derek found himself unexpectedly in the public eye. When the foundation received a request from a nearby correctional facility asking if someone could visit to speak with inmates preparing for release, Keanu didn't hesitate. I think you should do it, he told Derek. Derek blinked. Me? You've lived it, Keanu said. They'll listen to you more than they ever would to me. Derek hesitated but agreed. A week later, he walked through the same kind of steel gates that had once closed behind him. The familiar clank of locks made his chest tighten, but this time, he wasn't an inmate. He was a guest, a teacher, a symbol of what could be. Inside the facility's common hall, rows of men sat waiting, dressed in identical uniforms, their expressions guarded. A few recognized him from the news and whispered quietly to one another. Derek stood before them, clutching a small card of notes he didn't need. His palms were sweating, but his heart felt steady. He began simply, My name's Derek Hayes. A few years ago, I was sitting right where you are now, thinking life was over. I thought no one would ever trust me again, but one person did, and that changed everything. The room fell silent. Every eye lifted toward him. I didn't get lucky, Derek continued. I got challenged. Someone told me I still had something worth fixing, and when I started believing that, everything changed. His words weren't fancy or rehearsed. They were raw and real, spoken by someone who had been broken and rebuilt from the inside out. When he finished, the room stayed quiet for a few long seconds before a single man began clapping. Then another. Then the whole room stood. The sound of applause in that concrete hall was like thunder rolling through years of silence. Derek smiled, holding back tears. For the first time, he wasn't haunted by the walls around him. He was freeing others from them. When the applause finally faded, a few of the men approached Derek. Some shook his hand. Others couldn't even find words. One man, older and covered in tattoos, looked him in the eye and said, I've been here 20 years. You're the first person who made me believe I could still walk out different. Derek squeezed his hand firmly. You can, he said. You just have to believe it before anyone else does. After the talk, the warden thanked him, his voice thick with emotion. We've had speakers before, he said, but none like you. You didn't preach, you reminded them they still matter. That night, as Derek drove back toward Los Angeles, he replayed every face he'd seen in that hall. Some looked angry, some looked scared, but behind all of it, he saw flickers of something new hope. He realized then that redemption wasn't a one-time event. It was something you kept alive by giving it away. When he arrived back at Ride with Heart, the lights were still on. Keanu was sitting by one of the workbenches, reading through a stack of letters. "You're back late," he said with a smile. "Yeah," Derek replied softly. "Didn't want the night to end." Keanu gestured to the pile of envelopes. "You might want to see this." Derek picked one up. It was from a correctional officer in the same prison he'd just visited. Inside was a note that read, "Your story has started something here. The men are talking about second chances instead of lost time. Thank you." More letters followed, former inmates writing to say they'd joined community programs, families expressing gratitude, even mechanics offering apprenticeships. What began as a small training garage was now becoming a network of compassion that stretched far beyond the walls of Los Angeles. A week later, a news crew visited again, wanting to film a follow-up. This time, Derek stood in front of the cameras beside Keanu. Reporters asked about expansion plans, celebrity donors, and long-term goals. But Keanu kept his answers grounded. "This was never about fame or funding," he said. "It's about faith. When you believe in people, they start believing in themselves. That's the real project, the redemption that keeps growing." One reporter asked Derek how it felt to see his life change so completely. He paused, looking into the lens with quiet conviction. "It feels like forgiveness," he said. "Not from others, from myself." Across the country, schools, prisons, and community centers started writing to Ride with Heart. People wanted to learn, to volunteer, to replicate the idea. It was no longer just a program, it was a movement built on belief. Later, that night, Keanu and Derek stood outside the workshop, watching the lights fade as the crew went home. The city stretched out before them, full of noise, full of life. Keanu said softly, "You've come full circle." Derek smiled. "No, we've just begun." Keanu nodded, his gaze steady on the horizon. "Good, because hope doesn't retire." A year passed, and the name Ride with Heart had become a symbol of hope across America. What started as one workshop on the outskirts of Los Angeles had now expanded to 3 new states: Nevada, Arizona, and Texas. Each location followed the same model, teaching mechanical skill, self-discipline, and community trust. But more importantly, they carried the same quiet soul that Keanu had built from the beginning, a place where broken engines and broken people found their way back to working order. Derek now served as head of training across all branches. He spent his days flying from one workshop to another, meeting instructors, observing classes, and ensuring that the mission remained true to its roots. He wore the same gray shirt as everyone else. No title on the chest, no special treatment. To the trainees, he wasn't a boss. He was living proof that change was possible. At the Los Angeles headquarters, the original workshop had grown into something close to a family. On the walls hung photos from every location, smiling faces, rebuilt bikes, volunteers, and mentors. Each picture told a story, not of perfection, but of perseverance. One afternoon, Derek was walking through the shop when a group of new instructors arrived from Texas for advanced training. One of them, a young woman named Carla, approached him shyly. "Mr. Hayes?" she asked. "I just wanted to thank you. My brother was in the LA program last year. He's sober now, working. Said you saved his life." Derek smiled warmly. "Tell him he did that himself. I just handed him a wrench." Carla laughed, her eyes glistening. "That's what he said you'd say." By evening, the sound of drills and chatter quieted as the sun dipped below the horizon. Derek stayed late, as usual, double-checking workstations and making notes for the next day. It was peaceful at night, the kind of silence that hummed with purpose. He didn't notice Keanu walk in at first. The door creaked softly, and there he was, in jeans and a faded flannel shirt, blending in like one of the crew. He carried 2 cups of coffee and handed one to Derek. "You still don't go home on time," Keanu said. Derek smirked. "Neither do you." They sat on a pair of old stools near the motorcycle benches. The air was thick with the familiar scent of oil and metal. the smell that had come to represent redemption itself. Around them, rows of polished bikes gleamed under the dim workshop lights, machines built by hands that once trembled from shame but now carried pride. Keanu looked around and exhaled softly. Hard to believe it's been 3 years since that day in Tom's garage. Derek nodded, his gaze distant. Feels like a lifetime ago. Back then, I was just hoping someone would give me a chance. Now, I get to give them. Keanu smiled faintly. That's how faith works. It multiplies when you pass it on. Derek looked down at his calloused hands, the same hands that once symbolized failure, now steady with purpose. Never thought I'd be teaching anyone anything, he said. You've taught more than mechanics, Keanu replied quietly. You've taught forgiveness by living it. The night deepened outside the workshop. The glow from the fluorescent lights reflected off rows of polished motorcycles, each one representing a story of someone who refused to give up. Derek leaned back on his stool, sipping his coffee as Keanu looked out toward the open bay doors. I still can't believe how far it's come, Derek said quietly. When I first showed up, I thought you were crazy for believing in me. Now there are hundreds of people walking through doors just like I did. Keanu smiled faintly. That's the thing about belief. It only needs one person to start it. After that, it finds its own way. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the distant sounds of Los Angeles, the hum of traffic, the faint rhythm of motorcycles roaring down. In the highway, the world outside seemed faster, louder, but inside the workshop everything felt grounded. Derek stood and walked over to one of the bikes, running his hand along the tank. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if you hadn't been in that garage that day. Keanu chuckled softly. Then I suppose someone else would have helped you. You already had the fire. You just needed a spark. Derek turned toward him. You call it a spark. I call it grace. Keanu tilted his head. Maybe they're the same thing. For a long moment, neither spoke. The lights flickered slightly, and outside, the wind shifted, carrying the faint smell of rain. Keanu stood, brushing off his jeans. You know, you fixed more than bikes, Derek. You fixed faith, mine, theirs, everyone who walks through these doors. Derek smiled, eyes glistening. No, sir. You just reminded me that it was never broken, just forgotten. Keanu nodded, the words settling deep. That's exactly why this works. Because you remember what it's like to be on the edge. Derek nodded back. Yeah, and now I get to pull others away from it. As they stepped outside, the night air wrapped around them, cool and calm. The parking lot shimmered faintly under the streetlights. A few of the younger instructors were still packing up tools, their laughter echoing in the distance. Derek watched them with quiet pride. They'll be running this place someday, he said. Keanu smiled. That's the plan. They walked side by side to the truck, neither in a rush to leave. The sky was deep blue, the kind that made city lights look like scattered stars. Keanu paused by the open door, glancing back at the glowing workshop. Hard to believe this all started because one man refused to walk away, he said. Derek met his gaze. Or because one man refused to stop believing. They exchanged a knowing look, the kind built on shared battles and unspoken gratitude. Then Keanu started the truck, and the engine's low rumble filled the quiet night. As they pulled out of the lot, the workshop lights faded into the distance. But the work, the hope, and the second chances they built together burned brighter than ever. The road stretched out ahead, quiet under the dim glow of the streetlights. As Keanu's truck rolled down the highway, the faint hum of the engine filled the silence between him and Derek. Neither of them spoke for a while, letting the rhythm of the drive carry their thoughts. Behind them, the lights of the Ride with Heart workshop grew smaller until they became just a distant shimmer in the night. Keanu glanced at the rearview mirror, his eyes reflecting the fading glow. You know, he said softly, people think second chances are about being kind, but they're not. They're about being human. Derek looked out the window at the passing city skyline. Most people don't see it that way, he said. They think forgiveness makes you weak. Keanu shook his head slowly. No, weakness is pretending we're perfect. Strength is admitting we need each other." The words lingered in the air. They weren't dramatic or rehearsed, they were honest, shaped by years of scars and small victories. Derek didn't respond right away. He just nodded, letting the truth settle in the quiet of the drive. After a few miles, Keanu pulled over to the side of the road near a scenic overlook. Below them, the city lights stretched endlessly, a constellation of stories, struggles, and second chances waiting to happen. They both stepped out, leaning against the truck, breathing in the cool night air. Derek looked down at the glowing streets and said, "It's strange, isn't it? A year ago, I thought the world was done with me. Now, it feels like it's just getting started." Keanu smiled faintly. "That's what belief does. It doesn't erase the past. It builds a bridge over it." The two men stood in silence for a while, watching headlights trace across the freeway far below. The wind carried the faint scent of rain, and somewhere in the distance, the low rumble of a motorcycle echoed a sound that had once defined their beginning. Keanu turned his gaze toward the horizon. "You fix more than bikes, Derek," he said quietly. "You fixed faith." Derek looked over, humbled. "No, sir. You just reminded me that it was never broken, just forgotten." Keanu smiled, his eyes soft but steady. "Then promise me one thing. When the next person walks into that shop with nothing but guilt in their hands, you'll remember how this started." "I will," Derek said, "and I'll make sure they never forget what belief feels like." Keanu nodded, looking back toward the city lights that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. "That's all I could ever ask for." The truck rolled slowly down the quiet street, its headlights cutting through the soft mist rising from the pavement. Derek leaned back in his seat, staring out the window at the workshop growing smaller behind them. Inside that building were hundreds of second chances waiting to be written, and for the first time in his life, he knew he had been part of something that would outlast him. Keanu drove in silence for a while, his hand steady on the wheel. Then, almost to himself, he said, "You know, people think second chances make us soft. That forgiveness means forgetting what happened, but it's not that at all." He glanced over at Derek, his voice low and thoughtful. "Second chances don't make us weak. They make us human." Derek nodded slowly. "Yeah, I used to think forgiveness was just for saints. Turns out, it's for survivors." Keanu smiled faintly. Maybe they're the same thing. As they turned a corner, the hum of the city faded into the distance. The world outside seemed to quiet down, replaced by a sense of calm that came only after storms had passed. Through the windshield, the sky was opening gray clouds giving way to streaks of silver moonlight. Back at the workshop, long after they had gone, the lights glowed through the windows like lanterns of hope. Inside, a handful of trainees stayed late, finishing a project. One of them, a young woman barely 20, leaned over a motorcycle with her instructor guiding her hands. The sound of the engine finally turning over broke the stillness, and everyone in the room cheered. The sound wasn't just mechanical, it was alive. It was the sound of faith restored. Keanu's voice carried over the image in memory, steady and calm. "We can't rewrite the past," he said, "but we can build something better out of its parts." His words echoed through everything. Ride with Heart had become the laughter of the teens in class, the trembling smiles of parents at graduation, the calloused hands of people who had learned to create instead of destroy. Every wrench turned, every bike rebuilt, was a small act of redemption, a reminder that no one was beyond repair. When the truck stopped at a red light, Derek looked at Keanu and asked quietly, "Do you ever wonder how long this will last?" Keanu thought for a moment, his gaze fixed on the road ahead. "As long as people believe that broken things can still run," he said. "Engines, hearts, lives. They all need maintenance, but they're worth the work." Derek smiled, nodding. "Guess that means the job's never done." Keanu's eyes softened. Exactly. The light turned green. The truck rolled forward, disappearing into the night. Later, the camera would linger on the workshop. The steady rhythm of tools clicking, the hum of engines, the glow of lamps spilling out onto the street. Faces of men and women, young and old, worked side by side, their laughter blending with the heartbeat of their machines. Every face carried a story of loss and revival, of mistakes turned into milestones. Keanu's voice returned, calm and reflective. If you've ever believed someone deserved another shot, share this story. Because redemption doesn't begin in the headlines. It begins the moment someone believes you can be more. The screen slowly faded to black. Then white letters appeared, soft against the darkness. Redemption starts when someone believes you can be more. A gentle sound of an engine revved once, steady, strong, alive, before fading away. Then the final message appeared. Have you ever given someone a second chance that changed their life? Tell us your story in the comments. Because every act of belief, no matter how small, can rebuild the world one soul at a time.